It starts without warning. One day the replies are quick, the laughter is real, and the connection feels alive. Then the messages slow down. A call goes unanswered. And suddenly they are gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence so loud it echoes in your mind. You replay every conversation, searching for the moment it all slipped away, asking yourself the same haunting question over and over: why did they disappear? This is ghosting. And in the world of modern dating, it has become so common that almost everyone has either done it, experienced it, or both. Yet common does not mean harmless. Ghosting cuts deeper than most rejections because it leaves no clear ending. You are left with 1,000 unasked questions, your mind replaying every interaction to search for the moment things went wrong. It is not simply the absence of communication that hurts. It is the vacuum it creates for doubt, self-blame, and confusion to grow. Ghosting is defined as the act of abruptly cutting off all contact with someone without warning or explanation. It can happen after a single date, after weeks of talking, or even deep into what seemed like a committed relationship. What makes it uniquely painful is the way it denies closure. When someone ends a relationship directly, you can process their reasons, however painful they may be. With ghosting, you are left to create your own narrative, often imagining the worst. This lack of clarity keeps people stuck in the emotional space between hope and acceptance. The rise of online dating and instant messaging has made ghosting easier than ever. The same technology that allows us to meet strangers from across the world also makes it effortless to disappear without consequence. One swipe, one ignored message, and a connection can vanish. While this might feel convenient for the person leaving, it often leaves the other side dealing with unresolved emotions that can take far longer to fade. Understanding ghosting begins with acknowledging the unique form of rejection it represents. It is not just someone choosing not to continue with you. It is someone removing themselves from your life in a way that makes you question if they were ever really present to begin with. And before we can learn how to cope with it or prevent it, we have to face the truth of why it hits so hard. To understand ghosting, we have to look at the reasons behind it. And the truth is that they are rarely as simple as we want them to be. Sometimes the person who disappears is avoiding conflict. They do not want to have the uncomfortable conversation where they admit they are no longer interested, so they choose the path that feels easier for them in the moment, vanishing. In their mind, it spares both sides from an awkward exchange, but in reality, it leaves one person carrying the full weight of uncertainty. Other times, ghosting comes from emotional immaturity. Ending a relationship, even a short one, requires a degree of self-awareness and empathy. It demands that you face the discomfort of another person's disappointment. For those who have never learned how to handle that tension, disappearing feels like the safest escape. It does not require them to explain themselves or confront how their actions might hurt someone else. Technology plays a major role as well. Dating apps and social media have made meeting people easier than ever, but they have also made it easier to treat those connections as disposable. When someone knows they can swipe into another conversation within minutes, the temptation to simply drop the current one grows. The digital world has made it possible to vanish without physically leaving a shared space, and that has lowered the perceived cost of disappearing. In some cases, ghosting is not about avoidance, but self-protection. If someone feels unsafe, disrespected, or overwhelmed, they might decide that cutting all contact is the fastest way to create distance. While this can be valid in certain situations, it becomes problematic when used as a default response to mild discomfort instead of genuine harm. It is also worth noting that not all ghosting is premeditated. Sometimes people fade out because their priorities change suddenly. A new job, a family crisis, or a personal challenge can shift their attention elsewhere. In these moments, communication falls away not from malice, but from distraction or emotional overload. The problem is that regardless of the reason, the impact feels the same to the person left behind. Silence does not explain itself, and without an explanation, the mind will often invent one. That is why understanding these patterns is so important. It allows you to see ghosting as a reflection of the other person's capacity or circumstances rather than a verdict on your worth. Ghosting is not just a personal act between two people. it is part of a larger pattern shaped by the way we connect in today's world. Modern dating culture moves fast, with apps and platforms offering endless profiles to swipe through. In this environment, connections can feel both immediate and temporary. The idea that someone can disappear without consequence becomes normalized because there is always another conversation waiting just a click away. Research shows that ghosting is far from rare. Surveys suggest that between 29 and 42% of adults have experienced it at least once. Other reports indicate that as many as 3 out of 4 single people have been ghosted. These numbers are even higher among those who primarily meet through dating apps. The constant flow of new options creates an environment where people feel less invested in resolving one interaction before moving to the next. Technology has removed the social cost that once came with ending a relationship abruptly. In the past, breaking off contact often meant facing the person again at work, in a shared community, or through mutual friends. Today, it is possible to vanish from someone's life without ever crossing paths again. This sense of detachment can make ghosting feel easier for the one leaving, but far more disorienting for the one left behind. There is also a cultural shift at play. The emphasis on personal convenience and protecting one's own comfort has grown stronger. While self-care is important, the idea that avoiding discomfort at all costs is acceptable has seeped into dating behavior. For some, ghosting is not seen as cruel, but as a quick way to protect their time and energy. Understanding these social forces matters because it helps explain why ghosting feels so widespread. It is not always about a personal failing on your part, but often about the habits and attitudes that shape how people date and communicate in the current era. Recognizing this larger context can make it easier to separate the act of ghosting from your own sense of worth and to see it as a symptom of a culture that moves faster than real connection can keep up. Being ghosted can feel like someone has pulled the ground from beneath you. It is not only the absence of contact that hurts, it is the sudden loss of a sense of stability in the connection you thought you had. One day you are part of a shared conversation, and the next you are left outside it, trying to piece together a story with missing chapters. This experience often triggers feelings of rejection, abandonment, and confusion. Without an explanation, the mind naturally searches for answers and it tends to turn inward. You may begin to question your own value, replaying moments to see if you said something wrong or missed an important sign. This uncertainty is one of the most damaging aspects of ghosting. In relationships that end with a conversation, there is at least a framework for closure. With ghosting, there is no clear ending, which means the emotional loop can stay open for a long time. The unanswered questions keep the hurt alive because there is nothing to resolve them. For some people, this can lead to anxiety or a reluctance to trust new connections. Ghosting can also tap into deeper emotional wounds. If someone has experienced abandonment in the past, the silence of ghosting can reopen those feelings in a way that feels more intense than the situation alone might warrant. This is why two people can have very different emotional responses to being ghosted. For one, it might be a disappointment they move past quickly, while for another, it can be a trigger that lingers for months. On a psychological level, ghosting removes a sense of control. Communication is a shared space, and when one person unilaterally withdraws, it can leave the other feeling powerless. That lack of agency is unsettling because humans are wired to seek resolution when something important changes. Without it, the brain struggles to close the loop, which is why ghosting can dominate thoughts long after it happens. Understanding these effects matters because it shows that the pain of ghosting is not just in the act itself, but in the way it interferes with the mind's need for clarity and closure. Recognizing this can be the first step toward healing, because it allows you to see your reaction as a natural response to an unnatural ending rather than as a personal weakness. While ghosting is often viewed as a selfish or hurtful act, there are situations where stepping away without further contact can be the safest or healthiest choice. In these cases, the intent is not to avoid accountability, but to protect personal well-being or to remove oneself from a dynamic that has become harmful. One clear example is when the other person is displaying aggressive or abusive behavior. If someone threatens your safety, either physically or emotionally, cutting off all communication can be a necessary act of self-preservation. Another situation where ghosting might be justified is when clear boundaries have already been set and repeatedly ignored. If you have expressed your discomfort or asked for a certain behavior to stop and the other person continues to cross that line further, engagement may only invite more harm. In this case, disengaging completely can be the most effective way to protect your peace. There are also times when people sense manipulation or dishonesty early in a connection. If the pattern suggests that confronting the issue will only lead to more deceit or pressure, disappearing can be a way to avoid becoming more entangled. While this is not the ideal way to handle every uncomfortable interaction, it can sometimes be the least damaging choice. For some individuals, ghosting is also a means of ending casual connections that have no depth or established commitment. In the early stages of dating, especially in online settings, it is common for conversations to fade naturally. If both people have invested very little, and there is no mutual understanding about future contact, a lack of response might feel less like ghosting and more like the natural end of a brief exchange. The key distinction is whether ghosting is used to avoid discomfort or to protect from genuine harm. Avoidance may spare you in the short term, but it can erode trust and communication skills over time. Protection, on the other hand, prioritizes safety and emotional health when continuing the conversation would serve no constructive purpose. Understanding this difference helps frame ghosting not as a universally wrong action, but as a choice that must be weighed carefully against the context and potential consequences. Hearing real experiences of ghosting helps to see how the same act can carry very different meanings depending on who is telling the story. For some, it is a sudden and unexpected loss that leaves them questioning everything. For others, it is a conscious choice they felt was necessary to protect themselves. One woman described how she had been dating someone for 2 months with daily messages and weekend plans. Then one week, the messages became shorter and less frequent until they stopped completely. There was no argument, no obvious problem. She kept wondering if she had done something wrong, replaying each conversation in her mind. Months later, she learned he had reconnected with an ex and did not know how to tell her, so he chose to disappear. The knowledge did not erase the hurt, but it helped her see that his decision was about his own situation, not her worth. In another account, a man in his 50s explained how he had ghosted someone after just a few dates. He said he noticed controlling behavior early on, such as constant demands for updates and anger when he spent time with friends. Instead of confronting the person directly, he decided to stop responding to messages and block contact. For him, this was not about avoiding a difficult talk, but about avoiding a potentially toxic escalation. There are also stories where ghosting is mutual and almost unnoticed. Two people meet online, share a few light conversations, and then both become busy with other things. Neither reaches out and the connection quietly fades. In these cases, the absence of closure is less painful because the investment was minimal and there were no promises about the future. These examples show that ghosting is not a single uniform act. The meaning behind it and the impact it leaves are shaped by timing, emotional investment, and the personalities involved. For the person being ghosted, understanding that there are many possible reasons can help shift the focus away from self-blame. For the person choosing to disappear, being aware of the effect it can have might encourage more thoughtful ways to step away when possible. Real stories remind us that behind every silence there is a context, and sometimes knowing that context changes how we carry the experience forward. Ghosting is easier to understand when you look closely at the psychology of both the person who disappears and the one who is left behind. For the person who ghosts, the decision often stems from avoidance. Confrontation can trigger discomfort and anxiety, especially for those who have not developed strong emotional regulation skills. Avoidance offers quick relief because it removes them from the stress of an awkward or emotional conversation. In some cases, they genuinely believe disappearing would be less hurtful than being honest, but this belief usually underestimates the emotional impact of silence. There is also an element of control in ghosting. By cutting off contact without explanation, the person who ghosts determines the end on their own terms. They do not have to engage in a back and forth or justify their decision. This control can feel empowering for them in the moment, even if it damages their reputation and future trust. Some may ghost because they are unsure about their own feelings, and instead of navigating uncertainty with the other person, they step away to avoid making a clear choice. For the person being ghosted, the psychology is often rooted in a search for meaning. Humans have a strong need for narrative, and when an important chapter ends abruptly, the mind works overtime to fill in the blank. This can lead to overanalyzing past interactions, blaming oneself, or developing doubts about future relationships. The sudden withdrawal can activate feelings of abandonment or insecurity, especially if those wounds already exist from earlier life experiences. In both cases, fear plays a central role. The ghost fears facing conflict or disappointing someone. The ghosted fears being unworthy of clarity or connection. Understanding this shared emotional thread does not excuse hurtful behavior, but it can shift the perspective from one of pure blame to one of recognition. When you see ghosting as a product of fear, avoidance, and lack of communication skills, it becomes easier to process the experience without letting it define your value. It also highlights why building emotional maturity and communication tools on both sides is essential if we want healthier endings in relationships rather than disappearing acts that leave lasting scars. Healing from ghosting begins with accepting that you may never get the explanation you want. This does not mean you cannot find closure. It means you have to create it for yourself. The first step is to stop searching for hidden meaning in the silence. Reading old messages or replaying conversations in your mind will only keep you tied to the moment it happened. Instead, shift your focus to the present and what you can control. Taking care of your emotional and physical well-being is essential. Invest time in activities that ground you and remind you of your own value. Exercise, creative work, spending time with supportive friends, and even simple routines can help stabilize your mood. Surround yourself with people who affirm you, rather than feed the cycle of overthinking. Speaking openly with trusted friends or a therapist can help you process the feelings without judgment. It is also important to resist the urge to reach out repeatedly for answers. This may feel like the only way to move forward, but in most cases it reopens the wound and prolongs the sense of rejection. By choosing not to chase the person who ghosted you, you send yourself the message that your dignity matters more than their explanation. Part of healing is also reframing the experience. Ghosting says far more about the other person's capacity to communicate than it does about your worth. When you start to see their silence as a reflection of their limitations rather than a verdict on you, the power it holds over you begins to fade. This shift allows you to carry the memory without letting it define your future relationship. Finally, give yourself permission to grieve. Even if the relationship was short, the emotional investment was real. Ignoring the pain or pretending it does not matter will only push the feelings aside temporarily. Acknowledging the loss allows you to release it in time. Healing is not about forgetting what happened, it is about reaching the point where it no longer controls how you see yourself or what you expect from others. In that space, you reclaim your power and step back into the dating world with clearer boundaries and a stronger sense of self. Once you have acknowledged the emotional impact of ghosting, the next stage is taking practical steps that support your recovery. These actions are not about forcing a quick fix, but about creating an environment where you can regain balance and move forward with clarity. Start by removing unnecessary reminders. This might mean deleting old conversations, unfollowing or muting the person on social media, and clearing out saved photos or notes. This is not an act of bitterness. It is a way of reducing the triggers that can pull you back into overthinking. The more distance you create, the more space you have to heal. Reinvest in your own routine. Structure helps restore a sense of control when someone's disappearance has left you feeling powerless. Keep your schedule filled with activities that are meaningful and grounding. Whether it is work, hobbies, exercise, or social plans, staying engaged prevents isolation and helps shift your focus from what you lost to what you can build. Set a firm boundary about not reaching out again. Each attempt to make contact is an opportunity for further hurt, especially if the silence continues. Respecting your own boundary reinforces your self-respect and signals to yourself that your time and energy are too valuable to be spent on someone unwilling to communicate. Lean on supportive connections. Friends and family can help you keep perspective and remind you of your worth. Sharing your feelings with trusted people ensures you are not carrying the weight of the experience alone. If needed, professional guidance from a counselor or therapist can help you work through lingering emotions and build resilience for the future. Use the experience as an opportunity to clarify your dating standards. Consider what signs you might watch for in the future, such as inconsistent communication or evasiveness, and how you will respond if they appear. Turning the pain of ghosting into a lesson means you carry forward something constructive instead of only a memory of hurt. Practical steps do not erase the past, but they give you a roadmap for regaining confidence and emotional stability. Each action you take is a reminder that while you cannot control someone else's choice to vanish, you can control how you recover and who you choose to let into your life next. While you cannot eliminate the possibility of being ghosted, there are ways to reduce the risk by fostering clarity and mutual respect early in any connection. It begins with setting the tone from the start. Communicate openly about your expectations for contact, whether you prefer daily messages or a more relaxed rhythm. This does not need to be a heavy conversation, but it helps establish a shared understanding that makes disappearing less likely. Pay attention to consistency in the other person's behavior. Early signs of unreliability, such as frequent cancellations, delayed replies without explanation, or vague plans that never materialize, can indicate a lack of genuine commitment. Address these patterns calmly and directly rather than ignoring them. If they continue, it may be a sign to step back before you become more invested. Create balance in the pace of the relationship. Moving too quickly can sometimes overwhelm the other person, leading them to retreat without explanation. Allow space for the connection to develop naturally, without pressing for constant interaction or immediate deep commitment. This steady approach reduces pressure and helps ensure that interest is genuine rather than reactive. Be clear about your own boundaries and respect theirs. When people feel that their limits will be honored, they are more likely to communicate honestly rather than disappear. Boundaries also protect you from being drawn into situations where ghosting is more probable, such as with someone who shows signs of manipulation or emotional avoidance. Choose platforms and environments where accountability is higher. Meeting through mutual friends, shared communities, or interest groups often makes ghosting less appealing because it increases the likelihood of crossing paths again. While dating apps can still lead to meaningful relationships, the anonymity they offer can make vanishing easier. Finally, remember that reducing the risk of ghosting is not about changing yourself to keep someone from leaving. It is about creating a dynamic where honesty feels safe and where both people are clear on what they want. Even if ghosting still occurs, you will know that you approach the connection with integrity and self-respect, which makes the recovery process much faster and less damaging. There will be times when you realize a connection is not right for you, yet you also know that disappearing without a word will cause unnecessary confusion or hurt. Ending things without ghosting is about offering clarity while keeping the exchange simple and respectful. The goal is not to provide a full explanation that covers every detail, but to give enough closure so the other person understands where they stand. Begin with honesty that is direct but gentle. A short message such as "I do not feel a romantic connection" or "I do not see this progressing further" can communicate your decision without attacking their character. Avoid vague phrases like "I am busy right now" or "maybe later," as these can give false hope and prolong uncertainty. Clarity is a kindness, even if it feels uncomfortable in the moment. Consider the medium of communication. If you have met in person several times, ending the connection face-to-face or through a call can feel more respectful. For very brief or casual interactions, a thoughtful text may be enough. The important thing is that the other person hears from you directly rather than realizing on their own that you have stopped responding. Be mindful of tone. Even a clear message can feel cold if it is delivered with detachment or frustration. Keeping your language calm and neutral prevents the conversation from escalating and allows both sides to walk away with dignity intact. You do not need to justify your feelings or debate your decision, but you can acknowledge the time spent together and wish them well. There is also value in practicing this approach for your own growth. Ending a connection with clarity builds communication skills and emotional resilience. It shows that you can navigate discomfort without retreating and that you respect both yourself and the other person enough to face them with honesty. In the long term, this habit fosters better relationships because it reinforces trust, even in ending. Choosing not to ghost does not guarantee the other person will react calmly, but it ensures you leave the situation knowing you acted with integrity. That integrity becomes part of your self-respect and sets the standard for how you want to be treated in return. Ghosting is a symptom of how fast and detached modern dating can become, but it is also a reflection of how we handle discomfort and endings. Experiencing it can be painful, And in some cases, choosing it can seem easier than facing an honest conversation. Yet both sides reveal the same truth, that relationships require emotional maturity to grow and to end well. Moving toward that maturity means accepting that not every connection will last, but each one deserves a clear resolution. It means understanding that silence may feel easier in the moment, yet leaves behind confusion that lingers far longer than words ever could. When you choose honesty over avoidance, you create space for respect to survive even when affection has faded. For those who have been ghosted, maturity comes in resisting the urge to see the disappearance as proof of unworthiness. Instead, it becomes an opportunity to reinforce self-respect, to set stronger boundaries, and to seek relationships where openness is a shared value. Healing from ghosting is not about erasing the memory, but about reclaiming the narrative so it no longer defines how you see yourself. For those tempted to ghost, maturity is found in the courage to speak when it is easier to vanish. It is in realizing that the momentary discomfort of honesty is far less damaging than the lingering harm of leaving someone without answers. Ending a connection with clarity is a sign of strength, not weakness, because it shows you can hold both your own needs and the dignity of the other person at the same time. The reality is that ghosting will likely remain a part of the dating landscape, but each individual choice shapes the culture we live in. When enough people choose communication over disappearance, respect over avoidance, we create a space where endings are cleaner and connections are healthier. Emotional maturity is not about avoiding pain, it is about facing it with integrity and compassion. And when you carry that into every interaction, you not only protect your own peace, you also model a way of relating that others can follow, one conversation and one ending at a time.